Hi everyone, thank you for joining me today. If you're new here, then I'm Radhika and this is my YouTube channel DataZard. We are doing a series on dbt concepts, and in this particular video I'm going to be talking about the snapshots functionality provided by dbt. So without further ado, let's get started. Let's first start with an example. Suppose that in our employees table, like the employee HR data, which is coming from the staging schema, we have a lot of columns, but I'm just taking one particular column, which is employee salary. So we have employee number, then we have employee's salary. So suppose that for employee number 1, the salary today is 100K. Now tomorrow salary changes. So this was only valid till, let's say, 30 April 2026. Now on the 1st of May, salary has changed. So for the same employee, now the salary is 200K. This employee's, let's say, start date was 1 Jan 2025. So from 1st Jan 2025 till 30th April 2026, salary is 100K, but from the 1st of May 2026, salary is 200K. Now in our operational system, like where transactions and everything are being stored, this 100K would be replaced by 200, so that we only show what is the current salary for the employee. We will not have these separate rows. But we would want to store such kind of data, like the changes have happened, what were the changes, what is the history. We want to store this in our data warehouse so that we can go back and check things, or we can go back and find trends, or we just want to look back in time as to what were the previous states for these particular items. So the way to do this is we create something called as snapshots in dbt. So we are going to create snapshot. Now what snapshot is in dbt is, these are slowly changing dimensions. If you know the concept of slowly changing dimensions, then there are multiple ways to handle slowly changing dimensions, and there is particular type which is called as type 2 for handling it. It is called as SCD Type 2, and this is what is being used for dbt snapshots. We are going to model this scenario using SCD Type 2, which is slowly changing dimensions type 2. Now, I would like to give a brief introduction for what are slowly changing dimensions and what is this type 2. So, these dimensions which are slowly changing, we are changing the employee salary from 100K to 200K. This is what exactly is slowly changing dimensions. It's exactly what it says. It's just changing but slowly. So we have to model these so that we keep a history of what happened at what time and what is the current state. So we keep everything together in one table to store the history. So this is why there are multiple ways to model these slowly changing dimensions so that we preserve their history. One of the ways is to use a flag. So we can add a flag in our data warehouse and say that whether this is the current state or not. We can add previous value, so we can store 1, then 100, and the previous value, 1 current value and the previous value, so that we can store the history. The most important and most common and the best slowly changing dimension modeling way is to use type 2. So what this type 2 does is, it adds an effective from an effective to date. So the way this is going to work is, we're going to, in our data warehouse, we're going to have employee number, we're going to have their salary, then we're going to add date valid from, and another column date valid to. So for this employee 1, initially our salary was 100K, and the date it was valid from was when the employee joined, so 1 Jan 2025. This is what we have over here, and it is valid till 30 April 2026. So we are going to have these dates over here. Now the change happened. So again, for employee number 1, salary is 200K, and it is valid from 1st of May 2026, and now here you can either put null or you can put like 1st of Jan 999 to store, so that it is a very big value. So this is how, by adding date valid from and date valid to, we are modeling this data to store the history. In this way, we can go any time in the past and check what was the value. So let's say if I want to check on 1st of July 2025, what was the value for salary for this particular employee, then I know that 1st of July falls between this date, so my salary is 100K. And if I want to know what is the current record, so either I will search for record which is null or record which has this value, which will be a constant value to show that this is the current record, and I can know what is the current salary for the employee. So in this way, we are storing the history, and we are also keeping what is the current value in the data warehouse. So when you add date valid from and date valid to, this is what is type 2 modeling for SCDs. So what will happen in dbt snapshot is, when we will say to dbt that, hey, create a snapshot for this, so dbt is going to create it like this. It's going to store employee number, then salary, and then date valid from and date valid to. These will be automatically added. There is some configuration that we have to do, and dbt will take care of the rest of the things behind the scene. Now the next question that would be coming into your mind is, how do we create these snapshots at dbt? Are these SQL files or YAML files? So the way you create snapshot is, you go into the snapshots folder, and in this you create YAML files. So in these YAML files, you will define the configuration that is related to the snapshot. Now there are quite a few things that are involved here. So you can specify the database name where you can need to sync your snapshots. You can specify the schema name where you need to sync your snapshot. So these are necessary, because what if you want to store these snapshots in a different database or in a different schema? dbt recommends that you create these snapshots in different schema or database, just so that nobody accidentally deletes it or alters these things. Because once you create a snapshot, you cannot go back in time and get that data if you delete it accidentally. So it's important and recommended that you create these as separate schemas or databases. Then you can provide alias for this snapshot, like you want to call it something else, so you can provide that information. Now, one important configuration is strategy. Now, there are two types of strategies when it comes to snapshots. First is using check, and the other is using timestamp. Now, what are these two things? So if we go back to our example here, where we were using this employee salary information and we were creating a snapshot using this, we were using this updated date or created date. Like these date fields is what we were using to understand when a change has happened, and then that is how we stored the history. So if we are using some timestamp on the basis of which we know that some change has happened and we have to create that history into our snapshot, then that strategy is called as timestamp strategy, because here we are using a timestamp to understand the change. There could be scenarios where you do not have a timestamp column. In that case, you would use check strategy. So what check will do is, you can provide some column names like this column 1, column 2. If values in these two columns change, then you need to insert a row in the snapshot. So on the basis of columns, you are defining whether a change has happened or not, and these are the columns whose history you want to preserve. That's why you are checking these columns, and this strategy is called as check. Now dbt recommends that if you can, then always use this timestamp strategy, because this is the best one to use. You just have one column on the basis of which you have to figure out whether a change has happened or not. So there is one column that dbt has to track. This timestamp strategy, it will automatically handle the new or removed columns in your source table, so you don't have to think about these scenarios. And also this one is less prone to errors. Why? Because what if like 2 years down the line, your schema for this particular table from where you are fetching these snapshots, like for which you're creating these snapshot, changes, and you're either renaming these columns or altering these column definitions, etc. In that case, your snapshots will get affected, but this timestamp column will always stay the same. The other schema could change, so that is why this is less prone to error, and which is why dbt highly recommends that if you can, always use this timestamp strategy. Now the next thing that you need to provide is unique key. This key will determine this key is like the primary key, and it is used to determine a unique record. So there has to be a unique key, and it is a required field. So like for our example, it could just be the employee number, because we ensure that it is unique always. Next is, if you're using this check strategy, then you need to provide which columns need to check. So that is provided using check_calls configuration. So in this, we can say that you can check, let's say, status column. So if there is a change in the status column, you create a row in the snapshot to preserve the history. So you're providing which columns dbt needs to check to understand whether a change has happened in the source or not. So these are the columns that you specify in the check columns. So check columns is only necessary if you're using check strategy. If you're using timestamp, then this is not required. Like we were using check columns for check, what timestamp? If we are using strategy as timestamp, we need to provide dbt which column are we talking about. It has to monitor to understand if there is a change or not. So updated add is the configuration via which you can tell dbt updated add. You are setting this, let's say, as updated add. There is a column in your data set which is updated add. So you're setting this configuration as updated add. So whenever you're using the timestamp strategy, dbt will monitor this updated add column, and if there are any changes that has happened, like if it sees new rows added for updated add, then it's going to create new rows in the snapshot table. So it's just going to convert that into a snapshot. Now in the previous example, you would have seen that over here, dbt valid from was either null or you put a big date. So by default, dbt is going to put null for dbt valid to for current state, because it knows that wherever it is null, it is the current value. What if you want to change it to that particular date, 1 Jan 9999 or 2/999, whatever you want to set it as date? So in that case, what you can do is you can set a configuration called as dbt valid to current. This is the configuration that you need to set, and whatever value you set over here, that will go into your dbt valid to column. So you can specify 1 Jan 2999 over here, and that is going to go into your dbt valid to column for the snapshot, which are current rows. These are some of the main configurations that are required to be added into the YAML file for dbt to create the snapshots. Now let us see this practically. So now for practical implementation, I'm in my dbt project in VS Code, and first let us go to our dbt_project.yaml file, and in here we'll find out what is our snapshots path. So if you see here, our snapshots path is this snapshots folder. So I'm going to go in here, right click, and I'm going to create a new file, and I will call this HR data snapshot .yml, because this is a YAML file. Now before writing anything in this YAML file to create a snapshot, what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify our model on which we are creating this snapshot. So if this was a real world project, then I would have created snapshot either on the source itself or on this bronze model. But this bronze model has a lot of columns, like more than 10-12 columns, and it will be hard for me to explain how the snapshot is working. That's why I'm just going to choose a few columns from this source to create that particular model, on top of which I'm going to create a snapshot. So I already have the code ready for my model. So what I'm going to do is, in this bronze folder, I'm going to create a new file and call it bronze snapshot ephemeral. So I'm going to create this ephemeral model so that it doesn't sync into my data warehouse, because that will be data duplication and we don't want that. And I'm going to paste this code over here and explain. So we all know what an ephemeral model is. If you do not know, then I already have a separate video on this. Please watch that out. We already know how to create these models, so that is why I have just copied this code. Just to give you a brief, we are defining the config over here. Because this is an ephemeral model, so I don't have to define the database over here. It's just materialized as ephemeral. And then I'm saying select the employee number, monthly income, stock option level, and created at from this source. And this created at, I'm just converting into a proper date format, because this is what we are going to use in timestamp strategy. To say created at is what dbt has to monitor, and if it sees new things as created at, then it has to create a snapshot for it. So this is how I have created the model, and on top of this model I'm going to create the snapshot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just first going to run this dbt model so that I know it runs perfectly. So I'm saying dbt run -- select, and I'm going to give this model name. So snapshot, bronze snapshot, and ephemeral. So this is the model name. So our ephemeral model got created, so that's a good thing. And now on the top of this model, we are creating snapshot. So let us go to HR data snapshot.yaml, which is sitting in our snapshots directory. So it is over here. So in here, as always, like we do for seeds or models, we first have to write the keyword. So this is snapshots. And then first we have to provide the name of the snapshot. So I'm going to call this HR data snapshot. Then we have to provide the relation, on top of which relation do we want to create the snapshot. So like I was saying before, we should create snapshot on the source or on the bronze HR data model. But because I want to simplify things, so we are going to use ref and this bronze snapshot practical model that we have created. I'm going to say this is the relation that you have to use. Now we can provide description. This is to preserve history or whatever you want to say. And then I'm going to define the config. Now the first thing that we have to define for config is the database name. So for this, I'm going to create a new database and I'm going to call this snapshot. Now currently this snapshot does not exist in our Snowflake. We have not created this database till now, and we will have to create that first before running our snapshot. Reason being, dbt does not create databases for us. It can create schemas, it can create tables, but it cannot create these databases. So we are going to create that first in Snowflake and then run the snapshot. But let me just first complete the config. So the next thing that I'm going to write is the schema. So I'm just going to call this snapshot schema or SCH. This is what I'm naming my schema as. Then the next is we have to provide strategy. So like I was saying before, I'm going to use timestamp strategy, but I'm going to show you the check strategy as well. So don't worry about that. First, let's look at the timestamp strategy. And because we are using timestamp strategy, we need to have updated at. And we are saying, look at the created at column. If you see any changes over there, then come back and create a snapshot. So created at is our column, which dbt is going to monitor to see if there are any changes or not. Then we have to provide unique key. So the unique key for us is the employee number. That's what I'm stating over here. Now I'm just going to keep this config and going to create this, and then we can improvise on this config as and when we go forward. So let's just save this. And like I was saying before, go into our Snowflake and create this snapshot database first. I'm in my Snowflake, so let's first run create database snapshot to create this database. And once this is done, I'm going to run grant all on database snapshot to role dbt role, which means I'm telling dbt role it has access to this database so that dbt can do all the transformations and use this particular database. So this is what I have done. Now coming back to dbt, let's do dbt snapshot. This is the command to run the snapshots. So there is one error. Sorry, I've used the incorrect name and that is why it was causing problem. This is ephemeral. So let us now just clear it and run dbt snapshot. And now you can see that the snapshot got created successfully. And if you see, it is in our snapshot database, snapshot_sch schema, which is what we have mentioned over here. And HR data snapshot, this is the name of our snapshot. So I'm going to go into our Snowflake and let us just query this. So I'm going to say snapshot_sch dot HR data snapshot. So let us look at this data. And you can see that we have got employee number, monthly income, stock option level, and created at. These are the dates that, these are the things that we have got. And top of this, dbt has added those dbt valid from and dbt valid to columns, which I was mentioning before. And it has added a few more columns, dbt SCD ID and dbt updated at. So this is just the unique ID to identify this row, and dbt updated at as to when this was updated. So this is currently same as valid from. So if you see, we are now storing the history, but this was the first run. So whatever was present in our database, like in our staging area, we have brought things over here. Now let us try to update one of the things and see how those updates happen. Now before updating and seeing how snapshots get recreated, I made a small mistake earlier in this bronze snapshot ephemeral model. I used try to date over here for created at. This is not the right thing to do, because when we go to the snapshot configuration, we are using this created at column for the updated at. So we are telling dbt that if you see any changes in the created at, this is the column that you have to monitor and create snapshot accordingly. But this created updated at value, dbt expects this value to be a timestamp. It should not be a date. That is why I had to update created at to be a timestamp, and that is why I've just updated try to date to try to timestamp. So in this way, dbt is going to understand this is a timestamp, not just a date. And when we are going to use created at over here, the data type issue will not happen. So now that I have updated this bronze snapshot ephemeral model, let me just run this. So I'm going to do dbt run select bronze snapshot ephemeral, so that now instead of created at being a date, it is a timestamp. And once this is done, let's go to our snapshot, and then in our Snowflake, I have picked up employee number 10 as a random employee. You can choose anything. And I'm looking at what are the values for snapshot. So in snapshot, currently employee number 10 has monthly income of 9964. And why I'm saying this is the current value? Because dbt valid to date is null for this particular employee. And wherever it is null, we know that this is the latest record. So this 9964 salary is valid from 13th of November 2025 till today. Now I'm going to update this record. So I'm going to say that for this particular employee, I want the salary to be 11,000. And created at should be 6/5/2026. So the reason why I'm updating this created at date is because this is what dbt is monitoring. If it sees any changes over here, it's going to create that in this snapshot. It's going to preserve the history. So let's just run this one for now. So we have updated this in the staging schema for HR analytics. Now there will be no change in snapshot right now because we have not made any changes, like we have not called the snapshot again. But let's go back to our dbt, and in here I'm going to run dbt snapshot. Now as soon as I do this, you can see that this snapshot got recreated. And in here, if I now look at this, we're going to see 2 rows. So like I said, we are seeing 2 rows for employee number 10. The current row is for 11,000. This is exactly what we have updated. So it is saying from the 6th of May, the salary is 11,000, and between 13th of November 2025 till 6th of May 2026, salary was this much. So wherever you see null, you know that this is the current row, these are the current values, and these are the old values. And in this way, dbt is preserving the history. So if somebody asked on the 1st of Jan 2026, what was the salary for this employee, we're going to point out with this value. But on this date or after this date, if somebody asks what is the monthly income for the employee number 10, then this is the value that we are going to say. So you see, we are preserving the history, and we know at some point in history what was the monthly income or what was the stock option level for this particular employee. So you see how easy it is to build snapshots in dbt. If you had to build these in SQL, like directly by writing SQL, these are very complex things. You had to write multiple lines of code to just implement this functionality, which you have done here over by simplifying and just providing this simple config. The next thing that I want to show you is, instead of this dbt valid to being a null date, what if we set it as a very high value so that that date becomes a current date? We don't want to show nulls. In this case, there is another config that is available, which is called as dbt valid to current, and we can set this value. So I'm going to set this value as to date 99991231 or 2999, whatever you want to choose. So the existing dates which are null, they will not get replaced. They will stay as is, but from now on, if you make any updates, then those updates will have this particular dbt valid to date. Let's see this practically. So now I'm just going to first run it as is to show you that this does not get updated right away. It is only from future values that this is going to come into picture. So now that this is run, let's again see the snapshot for employee number 10, and you see that this dbt valid to did not get updated. But let us make another change. I'm going to say from 10th of May, I want the value to be 12,000. So we are adding another row for this one. So currently I've only made change in the staging area, and when I'm going to run dbt snapshot, this will be brought into snapshot. So let's run this now. So I'm going to have dbt snapshot run again. So this time dbt valid to date should be this particular date instead of null. So now that this is run, let me just run this again in our Snowflake. And now you see that the date for dbt valid to is not null. It is the date that we have specified over here, which is 31st of December 9999. So you see how these configs make things easier for us, and it is easy to play around with these things. Now you see 3 rows because we have 3 different histories present over here. So this was the practical implementation for the timestamp strategy. The same thing we can do using the check strategy. So for check strategy, we should only be using this when we do not have any timestamp column on which we can tell dbt to create the snapshot. So suppose that this created at date was not present. In that case, I'm going to change the strategy from timestamp to check. Let me just drop this so that we can run this again. So I'm going to just drop database snapshot, and now I'm going to create it again and grant all the permissions like the way we did before, so that we can recreate the snapshot, but this time using check strategy. So because we are using check strategy, we do not need this updated at. So I'm going to replace this with check calls. I think this is exactly what it is called, check calls. And now I'm going to provide the IDs here. So I'm going to say the 2 IDs that I want to check is the monthly income. If this changes, then you have to preserve the history. or if stock option changes. So these are the columns that dbt is going to monitor for changes. And I'm keeping this config over here so that we don't have null for current row, we have this big date for the null for the current row. Now that this is done, let us create dbt snapshot. So the first time it gets created, it's going to create for everything. It's just going to have one row because there is no history present. It is storing whatever the current value is. And from the next run, let's just update this. So let's pick another employee because we have already tested on that one. I'm going to pick employee number 11 this time. So you see for employee number 11, this is the salary. It's valid from 6th of May 2026 and valid to date is this much. So now what I'm going to do is, I'm going to say monthly income is 12,000 for employee number 11. This is the only change that I am making. So I am not making any change to created ad date. So I'm not going to make any change to the created ad date. It still stays as 15th of November 2025. But I'm just going to make a change in the monthly income. So let's just quickly run this. And now if you see over here, nothing changes. Everything remains as is because we have to do dbt snapshot over here. So let's do that. And we have told dbt that monitor this monthly income column and stock option level. And we know that there is a change. So let it run. And now let us again see the snapshot in Snowflake. And now we see two rows. First, both the rows, they have same created ad date. So I have not updated that date, but still dbt has created the snapshot values for us. It has stored the history for us because it was monitoring change in the monthly income column and stock option level, and it saw the change. So you see how easy it is to use either the check strategy or timestamp strategy, and how easy it is to create these snapshots in dbt. There are a lot more other configurations present and other nuances that are present for snapshots, and I won't be able to cover each and every one in this particular video because it has already been a long video. So I will be covering those in the upcoming videos. If you want to know about a particular thing for snapshot which you're not able to understand, then please put your suggestions in the comments and I will get back to you, or I will create a video on those particular concepts. I hope you enjoyed this particular video. Thank you for watching. I will see you in my next one.